The magnolia trees on King Street were doing what they always did in late April, blooming without permission, without apology. Filling the Charleston air with a sweetness that bordered on too much, Victoria Sterling had been standing outside Blue Ribbon Cafe for 7 minutes, phone pressed to her ear, while her best friend, Claire Ashworth, delivered what could only be described as a perfectly reasoned intervention. "You cannot show up to your sister's wedding alone," Claire said. "You told your mother you were seeing someone." "I told her I was talking to someone." "That's different, Victoria. She has a seating chart. You are listed as a +1. Your +1 has a name. Garrett. A Garrett who, from what I understand, has been removed from the picture since February." "Mutually removed," Victoria said, which was not technically accurate. She had removed him. He had sent 3 follow-up texts and a fruit basket. "The wedding is in 5 hours. A pause. "Your mother will ask questions." Victoria knew this. Margaret Sterling asked questions the way other people breathed, constantly, reflexively, with complete disregard for the comfort of those around her, and showing up alone to Natalie's spring wedding, to the most photographed social event Charleston had hosted in years, would trigger a cascade of maternal commentary that Victoria did not have the bandwidth to absorb. "I'll figure something out," she said. "What does that mean?" "You cannot hire." Claire stopped. "Victoria." "No, I'm not going to hire anyone." She turned from the cafe window and nearly collided with a man walking toward the door. He caught the door before it swung into him, pulled it open with one hand, and shifted a small purple backpack unicorn print, slightly lopsided with the other. He was tall, unhurried, wearing a gray flannel shirt and jeans that had clearly survived actual use, the kind of man who looked like he belonged somewhere quiet and purposeful. Not here, not on this street corner, not holding a child's backpack while she stood in crisis. "Sorry," he said, holding the door. "I'm not going in." She studied him for a half-second too long. He waited, neither impatient nor particularly curious. "Just still." "Victoria?" Claire's voice, tinny through the phone. "I'll call you back." She hung up. The man raised one eyebrow, a minimal expression that conveyed nothing threatening and everything politely confused. "I have a proposal," Victoria said. "All right. I need someone to attend a wedding with me this afternoon." "As my date?" "I'll pay you." She pulled $2 bills from her wallet. She had been going to tip the barista, but this felt more urgent and held them out. $2. Take it or leave it. He looked at the bills, looked at her, a long, evaluating look that did not feel judgmental so much as careful. "What time does it start?" he said. 2 o'clock. "I'll send a car." "Who's the bride?" "My sister." "Is there a reason you can't find someone from your actual life?" It was such a direct question that for a moment she didn't answer. Most men, in her experience, in her particular corner of the business world, did not ask her direct questions. They asked careful questions, angled questions, questions designed to not give offense while extracting maximum information. He just asked. "There are reasons," she said. "Are they your business?" No. He took the $2, folded them once, and tucked them into his shirt pocket. "I'll need to arrange childcare," he said. "And I have a daughter who may not cooperate with my leaving on short notice." "If she doesn't, the deal's off." "Fine." Victoria took out her phone. "Your name?" "Daniel Mercer." "Victoria Sterling." She typed in his number. "I'll send a car at 1:15. Wear something that won't embarrass either of us." She walked away before he could respond. Behind her, she heard the cafe door open and close. She did not look back. She told herself this was practical. She told herself $2 was barely a transaction. She told herself she was not doing anything desperate. She pulled out her phone and texted Claire. Problem solved. Claire's response came in 4 seconds. "I am calling the police." The apartment on Rutledge Avenue was small in the way that could be either charming or depressing depending on the light. In the morning it was charming. The old wooden floors caught the sun, and Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator in a riot of crayon color. By evening it could tip the other direction, especially when the upstairs neighbor decided to rearrange furniture at 10 p.m. Emma was at the kitchen table when Daniel came back, carefully applying glitter glue to what appeared to be a paper plate shaped like a crown. "You were gone a long time for coffee," she said without looking up. "I had an unexpected conversation." Daniel set the unicorn backpack on the counter and looked at his daughter, 6 years old, with her mother's dark hair and his complete inability to let anything go without interrogating it first. "Do you think you'd be okay with Mrs. Holloway for the afternoon?" Emma finally looked up. "The one with the cats? She has 2 cats. 3 now. She told me at the mailbox." Emma returned to her crown. "Why?" "I have something to do this afternoon. Something important or something boring." This was Emma's primary taxonomy of adult activity. Important things meant she might get a story out of it later. Boring meant he came home tired and ate cereal for dinner. "Possibly both," Daniel said honestly. He sat down across from her and watched her work for a moment. The glitter glue was being applied with the absolute seriousness of a surgeon. "A woman asked me to go to a wedding with her." Emma looked up again, slower this time. "Like a favor. Did she pay you?" He paused. "Yes," he said. "How much?" $2. Emma stared at him for a very long time. "That's not very much," she said finally. "No," he agreed. "It's not." He went to his closet and stood in front of it for longer than he had stood in front of a closet in years. There was the navy blazer from his old life, the life before the divorce, before the restructuring that had quietly eliminated his position, before he had moved back to Charleston and started over in a way that required daily recalibration of what starting over actually meant. He had kept the blazer because Emma said it made him look important. He pulled it out, looked at it, put it on. It still fit. He thought about the woman on the sidewalk. Victoria Sterling, he had heard that name. Sterling Dynamics, the company that had acquired 3 smaller firms in the region in the last 2 years. He had done some freelance financial consulting work adjacent to one of those acquisitions, and had seen the name in a briefing document, attached to a signature that brooked no discussion. He had not expected her to be standing outside a cafe looking like she was losing an argument with herself. "Daddy." Emma appeared in the doorway. "You look like you used to. Is that okay?" She considered this with the gravity that only small children and Supreme Court justices bring to decisions. "Yes," she said. "You should go. She probably needs help. You don't know that." "She paid you $2, Emma said. "Adults only do weird things when they need help." He had been a senior analyst at a mid-sized asset management firm in Atlanta when the marriage had begun to come apart slowly at first, then with the particular acceleration of things that have been structurally compromised for a long time before the visible damage appears. The divorce had been civil, which he understood now was not the same as easy. Sophie, his ex-wife, had remarried within a year and moved to Denver, and they had built, through some genuine effort on both sides, a co-parenting arrangement that worked because they were both determined to keep Emma out of the damage zone. The job had ended 6 months before the marriage did, which in retrospect had not been coincidental. He had been managing a portfolio through a restructuring that required him to recommend cuts he believed were short-sighted, and he had said so, in writing, with specificity, and the firm had thanked him for his perspective and eliminated his position in the next round. He had not been surprised. He had not been wrong, either, which was a consolation that wore thinner as the months passed. Coming back to Charleston had felt like retreat. His mother was here, and a few old friendships that had survived the years of not maintaining them, and a city that he knew in the particular way of knowing a place you've left and returned to seeing both what was there and the ghost of what used to be. Emma had started kindergarten. He had started over. These things happened in parallel. and taking care of her had given the rebuilding a shape it might not otherwise have had. He called Mrs. Holloway, who was delighted, and dropped Emma off at 12:45. Emma was already asking about the cats before the door fully opened. The car arrived at 1:15 exactly. A black sedan, clean and silent. The driver said nothing beyond a greeting. Daniel sat in the back and watched Charleston slide past the windows, the old houses, the wrought iron, the harbor in glimpses between buildings, and thought about what, exactly, he had agreed to. Magnolia Crest Estate sat 12 miles outside Charleston proper, at the end of a road lined with live oaks so old their limbs crossed overhead and turned the afternoon into something cathedral. Daniel had driven past the entrance once, years ago, and thought it looked like the kind of place where history accumulated like furniture layered, intentional, impossible to move. The gate was open. Cars lined the gravel drive in a way that suggested money spent on things that were not supposed to look expensive. There were florists still arranging something near the pergola. A string quartet warmed up somewhere beyond a stand of white azalea. The driver stopped at the front steps. Daniel got out. Victoria was already there, standing at the base of the steps in a dress the color of sea glass, somewhere between teal and sage, fitted at the waist, moving like water when the breeze caught it. Her hair was up. Her posture was the kind that came from years of choosing not to take up less space than you needed. She looked at him once, quickly. Something in her expression resolved. "You wore the blazer," she said. "You said not to embarrass either of us." "I did." She was already turning toward the entrance. "My father will be the man who looks like he's auditing something. My mother will ask you 3 questions and then make a judgment she won't share with you directly. My sister is the bride, obviously. Her name is Natalie. Her husband is Thomas Whitmore. He's pleasant. You don't need to know anyone else. What's our story? We met through work. Vague. Don't elaborate unless pressed. And if someone asks how long? 4 months. She glanced sideways. Can you remember 4 months? I can remember 4 months. They walked in together. The entrance hall of Magnolia Crest was the kind of room designed to humble visitors, high ceilings, old portraits, floors that had been polished so often they held light like still water. Clusters of guests in pastel spring attire turned to watch, the way guests at events like this always turned, performing the act of noticing without appearing to stare. Daniel noticed 2 things. Victoria's shoulder dropped a fraction when they entered a small, involuntary bracing, and her hand moved to the side of her dress, fingers pressing flat against the fabric, steadying herself against something only she could feel. He offered his arm. She hesitated for exactly 1 second before taking it. "Thank you," she said, quiet enough that no one else could hear. "Don't," he said. "It's fine." The guests parted slightly as they moved through the hall, and Daniel felt the particular quality of attention that followed Victoria, not the attention that came with celebrity, which was hungry and loud, but something more careful. She was someone who had been watched for a long time. She had learned to move through it. Harrison Sterling looked like a man who had decided, sometime in his early 40s, that the most efficient use of his face was to arrange it into permanent, mild disapproval. He was 63, silver-haired, trim in the way of men who ate breakfast at the same time every day and considered this a moral achievement. He found them near the garden terrace, before the ceremony, while the champagne was still being poured. Victoria. He did not kiss her cheek, he assessed. Daniel Mercer. Daniel extended his hand. Harrison shook it with the pressure of someone who had been told, long ago, that a firm handshake said everything. "What do you do, Mr. Mercer?" "Independent financial consulting, currently. Some project-based work for regional firms going through structural transition." He said it plainly, without the particular gloss that people applied when they thought a job title needed defending. Transition. Harrison let the word sit there. Reorganization, acquisition, workforce restructuring. Companies going through change often need outside perspective. Daniel did not look away. "What about you?" Harrison blinked. "I'm sorry? You're in real estate development, if I recall. The old Harbor District project, the mixed-use complex on East Bay that was Sterling Group, wasn't it?" A pause. "You know the project. I did some adjacent work during the permitting phase. 2 years ago." He kept his voice even. "Good project. Bold bet on the waterfront." "How's the retail occupancy tracking?" Harrison Sterling had not expected to be the one answering questions. His expression shifted not quite respect, but something one step back from the disapproval he had entered with. 82% as of Q1, he said. "That's strong for the first year." Daniel nodded. "Congratulations on Natalie's wedding, sir. She looked very happy when we came in." Harrison looked at him for a long moment, then excused himself with something that might have been grudging acknowledgement and moved back toward the terrace. Victoria said nothing for several seconds. "You knew about the harbor project," she said finally. "I told you. I consulted during the permitting phase. You didn't tell me that at all. We've known each other for about 4 hours." He accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. 4 months, he corrected, with the faintest shift at the corner of his mouth. She looked at him the way she might look at a column of numbers that had arrived at an unexpected total. Margaret Sterling arrived 6 minutes later with the efficiency of someone who had planned her route through the room in advance. She was softer than her husband, in the way that could be mistaken for warmth, but was actually a more precise form of assessment. "Daniel," she said, as though they had met before. "Victoria speaks highly of you." "She's kind," he said. "Do you have family here? In Charleston?" "My daughter. She's 6. She's spending the afternoon with a neighbor." Margaret's expression did something complicated, the flicker of social math being quickly recalculated. "A daughter," she said. "How lovely." She looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at a point slightly past her mother's left ear. "She has strong opinions about glitter glue," Daniel offered, "and about which cats in the neighborhood are the most interesting." Margaret laughed, a real one, brief and surprised. "She sounds wonderful," she said, and moved on, as she always did, having collected exactly what she came for. Natalie Sterling married Thomas Whitmore under a pergola threaded with white wisteria, in front of 80 guests seated on white chairs that left marks in the grass. The ceremony was 22 minutes. The vows were handwritten. Thomas cried at his own, which Daniel noticed seemed to catch most of the Sterling family off guard, as if emotion at a wedding was a variable they had not fully modeled. Natalie did not cry. She smiled the way a person smiles when something they have wanted for a long time is finally, irrevocably, happening. Later, she would not be able to say exactly when the performance stopped and the actual evening started. Somewhere between the third glass of champagne and the moment Natalie had pulled her aside near the wisteria pergola and said, quietly, "I'm glad you came, and that he's here," the tight architecture of the day had begun to loosen, not collapse, not fall apart, just let a little air in. Natalie had looked at Daniel across the lawn, at the way he was talking to Thomas's uncle about something that was clearly not small talk, at the way he stood, not trying to fill more space than he occupied, not trying to be noticed, just present in the specific way of someone who did not need the occasion to reflect well on them. "Where did you find him?" Natalie had said. "Outside a cafe," Victoria said. Natalie had looked at her for a long moment. "Vicky," she said the childhood name. "Deployed rarely and with precision, please don't let the good ones get complicated before they've had a chance to be simple." Victoria had not answered, because there was no answer that did not involve admitting that complicated was her default setting, that she had spent her entire adult life turning straightforward things into strategic problems because it was easier to solve a problem than to simply have something. Natalie had gone back to her wedding, and Victoria had stood by the pergola for a moment, breathing in the wisteria, and then gone back to Daniel, who had apparently just discovered that Thomas's uncle had opinions about the harbor redevelopment project and was treating this information with the respectful attention it deserved. The reception moved to the lawn as the afternoon light shifted toward gold. The quartet from the entrance hall played something that floated between classical and contemporary. Lanterns were lit along the garden paths. Someone near the bar was laughing very loudly about something that had happened in Nantucket. Victoria had been composed through all of it, smiling at the right moments, saying the correct things, performing the version of herself that worked at events like this. Daniel had watched her work a room the way he had watched people work rooms before, and he recognized the particular tension of someone who had gotten very good at a thing they did not entirely want to be good at. When the dancing started, she was standing near the edge of the lawn, glass in hand, watching rather than participating. "You should dance," he said. "I'm fine here. I didn't say you weren't. I said you should dance." He held out his hand. "It will satisfy the observers and give your face a break." "My face doesn't need a break. You've been holding it in exactly the same position for 2 hours." He kept his hand out. She looked at his hand. At him. Then she set her glass down and took it. They were not an elegant pairing. She was better at it than he was, which she clearly knew, and he was better at not caring about that than she had expected, which she seemed not to have anticipated. They found a middle ground somewhere in the first 30 seconds. The garden was lit gold and white. Cherry blossoms had blown in from the tree line and drifted across the lawn. "You're not what I expected," she said. Not quite a whisper, something between observation and admission. "What did you expect? Someone who would be uncomfortable? Or performing?" She glanced up. "You're doing neither. I have nothing to prove here. Everyone here has something to prove. Then I'm the exception." He turned them slowly, keeping distance from another couple. "For what it's worth, you should let it be less of a performance. You're more interesting when you drop the architecture." "I don't know what that means." "I think you do." She was quiet for a moment. Something shifted in the muscles around her jaw, not quite relaxing, but releasing the particular clench of sustained control. "Don't make this into something it's not," she said, quietly enough that only he could hear. "I'm not making it anything." He held her gaze. "I'm just talking to you. People don't usually just talk to me." "I know," he said. "That's what I thought." The song ended. She stepped back, recollected herself into the usual posture, and applauded with the rest of the guests. But for a moment, just one, she had stood in the garden like a woman rather than a chief executive, and the evening light had caught her entirely off guard. They found the balcony off the East Library, without planning to following the edge of the house away from the noise of the reception, the way people move at events when they have used up their small talk but are not yet ready to leave. It was quieter there. The garden below was lit, but distant. The sky had shifted to a deep, late April blue that held the last of the day. Victoria was holding her second glass of champagne with both hands and looking at the tree line. Daniel leaned against the railing and watched the garden. "I remember you," he said. She turned her head. "Not from today, from before." He said it the way he said most things, without preamble, without managing her reaction in advance. 3 years ago, a Wednesday, late afternoon in March, it was raining, the kind of rain that comes sideways. She went very still. You were pulled over on the Morrison Bridge access road. Flat tire on a black Audi. You were standing in the rain, looking at it like it had made a personal decision. Victoria did not speak. The memory was surfacing the way memories do when you have deliberately not visited them, slowly at first, then all at once. She had been coming from a board meeting. Portland, not Charleston. She had flown in for a 2-day acquisition review that had gone badly, and she was driving back to the hotel, and the rain had started on the bridge, and then the tire had gone, and she had pulled over and stood in the downpour trying to remember what you were supposed to do when this happened, which was call someone, which was something she could not quite bring herself to do because calling for help was a thing she had spent 20 years training herself out of. A truck had stopped. A man had gotten out without asking whether she wanted help. He had simply assessed the situation, opened the trunk, and changed the tire in 15 minutes while the rain came down. She had tried to pay him. He had refused. Before he left, she had taken off her dry-cleaned cashmere jacket, the one she had been keeping under a briefcase on the back seat, and handed it through his window. "I told you it was too nice," he said now, on the balcony, watching her with the same steady patience he had shown on the bridge access road. "You gave it back," she said. She could hear her own voice from far away. "I mailed it back. With a note." He paused. "You never responded. I didn't know what to write." She set her champagne glass down on the railing and looked at him fully, for the first time since the conversation had started. "I didn't know how to—" She stopped. "How to what?" "How to thank someone who helped me when I hadn't asked for help." The admission was quiet and cost her something. "I'm not practiced at that." "I know," he said. Not unkindly. "I could tell, on the bridge." The garden below moved in a light wind. Somewhere inside, the quartet had started again. "What are the odds?" she said, which was not really a question. "I stopped wondering about odds a while back," Daniel said. "Things happen or they don't. You can spend a lot of energy trying to calculate what it means, and you don't. Not anymore." He pushed off the railing. "I should probably get back inside. Mrs. Holloway has a 9 o'clock limit." She laughed, a short, genuine sound that surprised her enough that she touched her own mouth afterward, as if checking that she had, in fact, made it. The reception wound down the way Charleston events always did, gradually, then all at once, with a flurry of farewell embraces and promises to have dinner that most people did not intend to keep. Victoria said the correct goodbyes, kissed her sister's cheek, endured her mother's lingering evaluation, and made her exit with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years getting in and out of rooms without making it obvious that leaving was a relief. The car was waiting. She reached it and stopped. Daniel was a few steps behind her. He came to stand beside her without saying anything. The gravel lot was empty except for the remaining vehicles. The lanterns along the garden path were still lit. The night had cooled to the particular softness of late April, when spring stopped performing and became real. "I'm tired," she said. Not to him, exactly. To the evening. To the accumulated weight of 6 hours of being exactly what the occasion required. "I know. I don't mean." She turned to explain and found she didn't have the language for what she meant. "I mean, I'm tired of—" She pressed her fingertips to her collarbone, as if she could locate the specific exhaustion. "Of performing," he said. Yes. She had not cried since her divorce, not once, not even on the night it was finalized, when she had driven home alone and made tea and sat in her kitchen and felt the particular silence of a life that had rearranged itself without her permission. She was not going to cry in a gravel parking lot in front of a man she had paid $2 to attend a wedding. That was a certainty. She was, however, leaning against the car, head back, eyes closed, breathing in a way that was slower than usual and slightly ragged at the edges. He did not say anything. He came to stand beside her and leaned against the car too, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. After a minute or two, she said, "I owe you more than $2. "You don't." He took the 2 folded bills from his shirt pocket and held them out. "Actually, I'm returning these. Daniel, I don't want your money for this evening." He kept his hand extended. "Take them back." She did not want to take them. She looked at his hand for a long moment, then took the bills and tucked them into her bag. It felt less like a returned payment and more like something she would keep for reasons she could not yet articulate. "You should get home to Emma," she said. "I should." He straightened. "Are you?" "I'm fine." She said it the way she always said it. Then, because he was looking at her with the same unhurried attention he had given her on a rain-soaked bridge access road 3 years ago. "I'll be fine." "Those are different statements," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "They are." The car took him away. She stood in the gravel lot a while longer, holding her shoes, feeling the small stones under her feet, and decided, not for the first time, but perhaps more deliberately than before, that she was going to have to figure out how to be a person and not just a position. She drove home from Magnolia Crest with the windows down. It was the first impractical thing she had done in months. The air at this hour was cool enough to require the heater, and she did not turn it on. She let the night come in through the open glass and thought about a bridge access road in Portland, and a man who had changed a tire without asking if he should, and how she had not been able to write him a thank you note because she had sat down to write it 3 times and had not been able to find the register that matched what she wanted to say. Grateful was too small. Moved was too large. She had settled for nothing, which she recognized, even at the time, as the coward's arithmetic. She thought about the $2 bills on her passenger seat. She had taken them out of her bag at a red light and placed them on the seat beside her. And she drove the rest of the way, looking at them in her peripheral vision, 2 folded rectangles of green paper that meant something she was still assembling the language for. Her phone rang 3 times before she got home. Claire twice, her communications director once. She let all 3 go to voicemail. She sat in her driveway for 4 minutes. Then she went inside, poured a glass of water, and sat at her kitchen counter, the marble one she had chosen herself from a catalog, the one that was very clean because she ate most meals at her desk, and thought about the fact that she had not sat at her own kitchen counter in 11 days. She thought about Emma, who had opinions about ducks she had not yet met. She thought about a garden lit with lanterns and cherry blossoms drifting over white chairs, and a man who had looked at her father like an equal because he was one. She went to bed at midnight, which was early for her, and slept without her phone on the nightstand, which was not something she had done in 3 years. In the morning, she woke up and called him. She called on a Tuesday. He answered on the second ring. "I'm going to be in your part of the city on Thursday afternoon," she said. "I thought, if you weren't busy." She stopped. Started again. "Would you want to get coffee? With Emma, if that's easier." He did not point out that the last clause had collapsed her careful casualness. "Waterfront Park," he said. "There's a good bench by the fountain. Emma likes the ducks. I didn't know Charleston ducks were notable. Emma thinks all ducks are notable." A pause. "She might interrogate you." "I handle high-pressure interrogations professionally," Victoria said. "Not like this, you don't." He was right. Emma Mercer arrived at the park in a yellow rain jacket, despite the clear sky, and red rubber boots that she was clearly wearing by personal preference rather than meteorological necessity. She assessed Victoria with the same unhurried attention her father used, which was either genetic or learned, and either way was deeply disconcerting in a 6-year-old. "You're the lady from the wedding," Emma said. "I am. I'm Victoria. Dad said you were nice." Victoria glanced at Daniel. He looked at the fountain. "Dad might be generous," Victoria said. "He said you were trying," Emma clarified, which was more accurate and considerably harder to navigate. They walked the fountain path and then the duck pond, where Emma had strong opinions about which ducks were which. "That one is Gerald. He always cuts in line," and conducted what could only be described as a comprehensive audit of Victoria's knowledge of ducks, general wildlife, and the question of whether pigeons had feelings. "I genuinely don't know about pigeons," Victoria admitted. "Me neither," Emma said, satisfied, as though shared uncertainty was a more honest foundation than claimed expertise. At the swing set, Emma demanded to be pushed, and then informed Victoria that she was doing it wrong, and that the correct angle was more toward space. Victoria adjusted her angle toward space. Emma approved. "You don't have kids," Emma observed. "No," Victoria said. "Is that sad for you?" "Emma," Daniel said from the bench. "It's a real question," Emma said. Victoria pushed the swing again, watching Emma arc upward. "I don't know yet," she said. "I think I'm still figuring out a lot of things." "That's okay," Emma said, entirely seriously. "Dad says figuring things out takes time and you shouldn't rush it or you get the wrong answer." She arced back down and kicked her legs out. "Like math." "Like math," Victoria agreed. She pushed the swing again and again, and watched Emma work up to a height that satisfied her, and then simply ride it. Not fighting the arc anymore, not trying to go higher, just moving through the air with the complete physical ease of someone who has found the right rhythm and is content to let it carry her. Victoria thought, I don't know the last time I did that. She could not, offhand, remember a single moment in the last 3 years when she had done something without also managing the something, without also watching herself do it from a slight distance and assessing whether she was doing it correctly. It was a strange thing to realize in a park, while pushing a 6-year-old on a swing, with a man reading on a bench 20 feet away, who had once changed her tire in the rain and was now present in her life in a way she could not entirely explain, and was trying not to over-explain. On the bench, Daniel was watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read, careful and open in equal measure, the way a person looks when something is happening that they have not prepared a response for yet. She felt it too, a kind of warmth that had no corporate application whatsoever, that was not useful and was not strategic, and arrived with the simple persistence of things that are true. It started on a Friday, as most bad things did, when the news cycle needed something to fill the space between actual events. Someone at the Magnolia Crest wedding had sold photographs. There were 3 of them, Daniel and Victoria on the dance floor, her hand on his arm, looking at each other in the particular way that cameras find before people do. The story that accompanied them was not factually incorrect so much as strategically incomplete. Sterling Dynamics CEO spotted with mystery man at exclusive spring wedding. Sources say relationship is serious. The 3rd photograph was the one that mattered. It had been taken through the fence at Waterfront Park. Emma was on the swing. Victoria had her hand on the chain, turned slightly toward Daniel on the bench. It was a domestic, unhurried moment, the kind that people who have been together for a long time stop noticing, and in the photograph it looked exactly like what it almost was. Victoria found out at 6:47 a.m. when her communications director, Susan Park, called and read her the headline with the flat professionalism of someone who had learned to deliver bad news without editorial embellishment. She had her legal team make the formal inquiry calls before 8 a.m. The outlet agreed to remove the photograph of Emma within the hour. The other 2 stayed. She called Daniel at 8:15. I know, he said, before she spoke. His voice was quiet and careful, which was worse than if he had been angry. They've taken down the photo of Emma. My team is tracking any reposts. I've had a formal cease and desist issued to the outlet, and I'm pursuing the source. It won't. How did they get into the park? He was not accusatory. He was asking because he needed to understand the perimeter of the thing. Long lens, public space. I didn't anticipate. She stopped. I should have anticipated. That's my failure, not yours. Silence on the line. Emma's school, he said. Her teacher called this morning. Someone tried to take a photo outside the gate. Victoria closed her eyes. I'm sending someone, she said. Today. Professional, discreet, non-uniformed, just to have eyes on the building for the next 2 weeks until this cycle moves on. I know that's not, she stopped again. I know that's not the same as it not having happened. No, he said, it's not. I'm sorry, Daniel. He was quiet for a moment. Emma doesn't know what happened. I told her there were some people taking pictures who shouldn't be. She said that was rude. She's right, Victoria said. She's 6, he said. She needs things to stay quiet. He paused. I need to know that if this continues, you'll tell me. Not manage it around me. Tell me. Yes, Victoria said. Absolutely. Emma is the priority. I mean that. Then we'll figure the rest out, Daniel said, and the careful steadiness in his voice, the same steadiness that had changed a tire in the rain without being asked, that had stood in a parking lot without filling the silence, held the phone call together. She drove herself. This was the first decision. She had rehearsed versions of this visit in her head during the drive over, as she did with most things that mattered, constructed possible scenarios, anticipated responses, prepared her language. The habit was so ingrained that she had run through 3 different versions of what she might say before she caught herself doing it and decided, deliberately, to stop. Whatever happened tonight would not be improved by being scripted. Some things required you to show up without a plan and discover what you actually meant when the words were coming out in real time. She had texted him at 8:15. "I need to talk. Can I come over tonight?" He had responded, "Yes." That was the entire exchange. 4 words between them. And she had read them 6 times on the drive over, looking for information that was not there, and finally understood that the information was in what was not said. No questions about what she needed to talk about. No hedging, no conditional welcome. Just yes. Not the town car, not the driver, she took her own car. The gray Volvo she rarely used because it made her look like a person who ran errands, and she parked it on Rutledge Avenue, 2 buildings down from his, and sat in it for 3 minutes before getting out. The building was brick, 4 stories. The kind of building that had been standing long enough to acquire the personality of the neighborhood. She buzzed apartment 2C. He answered without asking who it was, which meant he had been watching from the window, which she decided not to analyze. He met her in the doorway. No blazer this time, a worn flannel again, the everyday version of himself. Emma was presumably already asleep. The apartment behind him was quiet except for the low sound of something on the radio in another room. "Can I come in?" she said. "Yes." He stepped back. The apartment was exactly as she had imagined. It's small, functional, accumulated rather than decorated. Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator. There was a stack of books on the coffee table next to a half-finished mug of tea. The kind of home that had been lived in and was not apologizing for it. She sat on the couch because standing felt like she was waiting to leave, and she had not come here to leave quickly. "I need to say something," she said. "And I'm going to say it badly, and I'm asking in advance for some patience." "All right. I have been very good, for a very long time, at building things that work," she said. "Companies, strategies, structures, partnerships. I know how to build things that function. I don't," she looked at her hands. "I don't know how to build something that feels like anything. Or I did know, and I stopped doing it. Because the cost of feeling things is that they can be taken away." "Victoria, I'm not finished." She looked up. "I know that what I did, inviting a stranger to a family event for $2, then taking you to a park where someone could photograph your daughter. I know those are not the actions of someone who knows how to be careful with people. And I know I should have been more careful with Emma. I should have thought about what proximity to my life means for people who aren't protected by the things I can afford." Daniel sat in the chair across from her. He listened with his full attention, which was a specific and uncomfortable thing to be given. She thought about all the things she had optimized out of her life over the past decade. The relationship before Garrett Stephen, who had been patient in the way of a man who had made peace with being secondary, and whom she had ended things with, not because she didn't care, but because she couldn't figure out how to care in the specific way that required her to slow down. The friendship with her college roommate that had narrowed to 3 texts a year, then 2, then a birthday message in October that she always sent and always received, and that stood in for something larger, that neither of them had the time to have anymore. Her sister's first 2 years in Charleston, which she had missed in the particular way of someone who lives 40 minutes away and might as well live in another country. She had told herself these were the costs of building something, that the ledger made sense, give this, receive that, and the sum total would equal a life well constructed. Sitting in Daniel's living room, she was not sure the math had ever been right. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally. "I don't know how to be in something without trying to run it. I don't know how to let someone help me without feeling like I've failed at something. I don't," she stopped. "I don't know how to be real, Daniel. I've been performing for so long that I'm not entirely sure what's underneath the performance anymore." He was quiet for a moment. "Then learn," he said. It was not the response she had expected. She had expected comfort or reassurance or a careful acknowledgement that this was complicated and perhaps they should take time. She had not expected 2 words, direct and simple and without any of the cushioning that most people wrapped around difficult truths. "That's it?" she said. "That's it?" He leaned forward. "You're good at learning things. I've watched you adapt in one afternoon to a family that would make most people fold. You figured out my father-in-law, your father, Harrison Sterling. Yes." A pause. "You figured him out in about 3 minutes. You figured out Emma in about 20. You're not actually bad at people, Victoria. You're just afraid of what it costs." "And you're not?" she said. "You spent 2 years rebuilding a life from a marriage that didn't work, in a city you came back to because there was nowhere else to go, with a daughter who needed stability and a career that had to start over. And you're sitting here telling me the answer is just to learn." "I am," he said, "because that's all I did. One day, one conversation. I got things wrong. I got things right. Emma told me when I was being an idiot, which she does with extraordinary frequency for someone who only recently learned to read." She looked at him across the living room, across the coffee table with the tea and the books, across the distance of everything she didn't yet know how to cross, and thought that she had hired this man for $2 and was now sitting in his apartment at 9:30 on a Wednesday night, understanding for the first time in a long time that she did not want to leave. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" He raised an eyebrow. "I'll learn." She kept his gaze. "But I'm going to make mistakes. Significant ones, probably. I have a historically poor track record with things that require sustained vulnerability." "I know," he said. "I've been watching you for about a week and a half. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be honest." He stood and crossed the room and sat beside her on the couch, close, deliberate, not pretending the distance was anything other than a choice. "I made mistakes too. I married someone we were both wrong for. I spent a year being bitter about things I couldn't change. I moved back to the city I grew up in and thought it was giving up." He paused. It wasn't. What was it? It was starting over correctly. He looked at her, smaller, slower. "With a kid who required me to actually be present." She thought about the $2 bills in her bag, the way she had kept them, for reasons she had not examined until now, when the reason was sitting beside her in a worn flannel shirt on a Wednesday night, with the radio low and the apartment quiet around them. She kissed him. She did it without announcement, without prelude. Just a decision made and carried through which was, when she thought about it later, entirely on brand and entirely different from anything she had decided before. He kissed her back, unhurried like he did most things. When they broke apart, she was aware of the radio, the sound of the street below, the drawn breath of the apartment holding them, and then, from the hallway that led to the bedrooms. "Dad?" "Emma. 7 years old next month." Standing in the hallway in pajamas printed with small yellow stars, hair entirely sideways from sleep, holding a stuffed elephant by its ear. Daniel said. "Go back to bed. I heard talking." She looked at Victoria, thought about this. "Oh," she said, with the particular equanimity of a child who had been given the correct information at the correct developmental stage. Hi, Victoria said. "Is your name still Victoria?" "Still Victoria." "Okay." Emma considered her with the full, unfiltered attention of someone who had not yet learned to look away from things she wanted to understand. "Are you going to keep coming over?" Daniel started. "It's a real question," Emma said, in the same tone she had used at the park, about pigeons and feelings. Victoria looked at her. "Yes," she said. "If that's all right with you." Emma considered this with the gravity it deserved. "You can push a swing better than most people," she said finally. "You just need to work on the angle." "I'll practice," Victoria said. "Good." Emma turned and padded back down the hallway, elephant trailing. Night, M. The hallway was quiet. The radio played something slow. Victoria sat with her shoulder against Daniel's and looked at the far wall, the crayon drawings visible through the kitchen doorway. The ordinary, beautiful mess of a life that had been rebuilt from difficult material, and felt the particular stillness of a person who has arrived somewhere after traveling a long time without knowing where they were going. 4 months, she said. He laughed, brief, quiet. Yeah, we should probably work on the actual story. We've got time. She thought about what she had said, I'll try not to hurry this, and how it was already more honest than most things she had said in the past year. Not a promise of perfection. Not a guarantee. Just an intention, stated plainly, in a parking lot on a spring night, to a man she had met outside a cafe for $2. She stayed until it was late enough to be early. When she finally stood to go, Daniel walked her to the door, and neither of them made it smaller than it was. The city was still going about its business outside the late-night traffic on Rutledge. Someone's music from a neighboring window, the ordinary sound of April in a southern city that had survived a great deal and was not particularly impressed by one more spring. All of it held the same quality of things that continue without requiring your permission or attention. Outside, the magnolia trees on Rutledge Avenue were still blooming.